Hey guys, how's it going? Preparing here. So I casted last night Lord of the Arena. This is Reynad's tournament. If you don't know who Reynad is, pass by a few Twitch streams on the Hearthstone side and you'll kind of figure it out. And this tournament was kind of interesting for those who haven't seen it. I don't exactly know where the VODs are, but if you check the Reddits or maybe I stumble upon them, I'll include a link in the description sometime later. But some cool stuff went down. I'm not going to spoil all the goodies of who won and all that. But what I'm going to talk about is the format and kind of my feedback on it. So the format was that it was pre-recorded because to have an arena tournament, you have to have people draft decks, and this process can take a while for some people. And essentially, each person had one try. They have to win the RNG on the classes. They have to win the RNG on the cards, and they come up with some sort of deck, and the constructed limitations that each deck was placed in. And in some cases, this was actually relevant. Some players ran into, for instance, 4 water elementals, and who wouldn't love that? Well, because of these limitations, you couldn't pick more than 2, because you essentially take these decks that you create through the arena drafting process and you implement them into a constructed, and you play constructed with the cards that you kind of drafted in arena. And there's a little bit more strategy to this. One side is that you can play a little bit of an off-ball deck. Often in arena you make decks that do good in general but are specifically important to beat mages, because when you get to like 6 wins, all you face are the mid to slow mage decks. Just you have to have creatures that survive flame strike, and you have to have decks that have decent amount of value cards. Or on the flip side, you need an extremely good aggro deck. And in these type of tournaments, drafting even a mediocre aggro deck may take some people by surprise. So there is a little bit more strategy than there is in the normal drafting in arena. And on the other end, if you have one of a card and you see a second one early on in your draft, let's say, let's say you're playing Shaman, you get 1 Stormforged Axe as your second card, and you have the option, probably the best card, let's say still, on the 3rd card of the draft. You may not want to pick it because later on you may have the axe up against much worse cards or something like that. So there's a little bit of strategy in the drafting process as well. But in general, what I want to talk about is that this format is really interesting because people get to see something they don't see before. They get to see both sides of an arena game in the tournament format, and it's more interesting because it's not people playing the same constructed decks that everyone's seen hundreds, in some cases thousands of times over. It's not Miracle Rogue versus Watcher Druid or anything like that. It's new, and the players they have more to play, because even though often these decks are simpler, they don't have many combos. The players are not preemptively familiar with the combinations of the cards, and it's difficult to count even in their own decks what cards exactly are available. So the skill element, in my opinion, is higher, but also the RNG element, especially in the recent tournament that I casted, was a lot higher because of the drafting process. So I had some ideas and I just throw them out there. People who like to think about Hearthstone, maybe I'll give you guys something to think about, and maybe we'll talk about this, and maybe there's going to be some more arena tournaments in the future that may adapt some of the rules. So the one thing I didn't really like is there was a significant advantage to the players who had mage, because currently Hearthstone is balanced around constructed. In arena it's not necessarily balanced, but because there are so many random elements, it's not that big of a deal. However, when you have a tournament structure and you're playing for monies, when it comes to drafting, if you happen to see mage among your picks, well, you're at a distinct advantage. And it's not really fair, and honestly, as a die-hard arena player, it's not really that much fun to play against mage. You queue up and you see mage and you're like, well, damn, this again, and pretty much how half the game is going to play out just because they're that class. So what I propose is, because Mage is so far above, at least in my opinion, I think most people agree, so far above the other classes in the arena standings, that there should be some kind of ban process. And this is to keep in mind that in the arena tier list you have Mage, who's far above everything else. Then you have kind of the ball of other classes, which kind of need a decent amount of good cards to be good. So you have, Shaman, Paladin, Druid, Rogue. Those four, not specifically in that order. You kind of need some good cards. Even Priest is actually very good if you're playing, control games. So, it's kind of, a little bit there, a little bit here kind of deal with the cards. You get a few, you do well. You see back and forth games, really cool stuff. But with mages, often Fireball, Fireball, Pyroblast, and there's not much interaction, there's no gameplay. It's like you're playing the old freeze mages, except it's more frustrating because your deck doesn't match up to it. You can't counter that deck in Arena. So, the idea is that all players of the tournament, they name one class they want to ban before all of them are selected, and you have a tally. The players who voted the first and second most bans, those classes cannot be played. So let's say people cannot choose Mage or Druid. People have to play the other classes. And this is fair, this is 2, because when you enter Arena you have a selection process of 3, and you always have the third option. And the second rule that I think is also important, because even though sometimes you get the class you want, you get it in the upper tier, you get like a Rogue or something, you don't necessarily get good cards. And playing Arena as much as I have drafted some unbelievably terrible decks. And to avoid this, I think it's fair that you have a certain number of iterations through the draft. So you would draft, let's say, 3, at least in a tournament that isn't live, you could draft, let's say, 3 times, given the class ban rules, and then you could pick one of the 3 decks that you ended up drafting. And because, it kind of takes gold to do this. You have to make a deck, you have to retire it. I kind of get that. There are actually websites out there that have arena pre-drafts that go over this stuff, and you don't have to do it within the game itself. So there are a lot of options. It's really cool stuff. It's definitely worth looking into, because I think more people enjoy the arena style tournaments than they do the constructed ones. Constructed does have an amazing structure when changes happen. And changes haven't happened for a while, and I think people really want to see the competitive side of Hearthstone, and I assure you guys, more interesting stuff, more skill can be shown when the arena tournaments are involved. So we'll see what goes on. I'll try to be part of it. Hope you guys enjoy the tournament, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.